Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Iowa House. This is State Representative Tracy Ehlert, and I have my clerk, Truley, with me. We are doing a Lunch and Learn at Your Leisure video series on questions that I'm asked often by constituents. And the first video that we're making today is on the journey of a bill. I often get asked, how does a bill become law? And what is the process that it has to go through? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and hopefully teach you something new. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up some of these slides. Okay. Oops. Okay. And can you see the slides, Truly?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So a bill obviously has to start from an idea. A legislator might be contacted by a constituent who has an idea. This happens a lot with our human resources bills, especially when they have to do with Medicaid or different medical issues. You might have a city or county issue, and maybe the city and county approach the legislature about something that they need done to help make things easier for them locally. Or you might have an organization or association come to you. I think about some of our different lobbyists, and we usually have people up here that lobby for early ed or lung cancer, just a whole host of organizations. It could also come from your personal experience. So I'm an early childhood educator. A lot of the bills that I introduce are on early ed and childcare topics, and I have pulled them from my own work or things that I hear in the workforce. So idea is obviously it has to start from there.
So Tracy, once you have an idea for legislation, how does it actually become legislation?
Okay, so the next step then, after you take that idea, you would work with either, well, usually both. You work with staff and your legislative services agency or LSA. And so you can see here on this slide that there's different agencies within LSA, and then here are our different staff. Each of them staff different committees. So like if I'm drafting a bill on education, then I'm going to talk to Dave because he's our staffer for education, or a lot of mine are around childcare. So I work with Kelsey quite a bit. And then we will work with the people from LSA together to get it drafted. They help us connect to the different pieces of code that the bill might affect, get the language right, and all that technical stuff that just the everyday person doesn't know, and they are well versed in. An important thing to remember is that there are cutoff dates to get your legislation drafted, so we can't just request bills at any point in time. So typically legislation is worked on in the interim before the session even starts. And then once you're done working with staff and LSA, then your bill gets drafted, and you can view it online and you can reject it if it needs changes, or you just decide you don't need that piece anymore, or you accept it. And then once it's accepted, it arrives on your desk in this envelope, and then you look it over again and sign off on it. And then it's able to be read in and introduced to a committee. So once it's introduced to a committee, then the committee can decide if they're going to take the bill up or not. So just because a legislator has legislation drafted doesn't mean the committee will even take it up. So assuming they do decide they like that bill, then they will assign it to a subcommittee. And here you can see I'm in a subcommittee. I think this was on a child care bill or a preschool bill last session. The subcommittee is a great opportunity to learn more about the bill, and they're open to the public, so anybody can come to the subcommittee. And the subcommittee typically is a 3-person subcommittee. It'll have 1 person from the minority party and 2 members of that committee from the majority party. And then your staffer for that committee usually tries to attend with you. And then all the stakeholders in the bill, either those that are supporting it or those that oppose it or just want to learn more, show up and they can give comments. So like this morning, I had a subcommittee on a bill around chiropractic care and well, child checks. And so we had a chiropractor that was there that spoke. We had the lobbyist for the Chiropractor Association, DHS spoke. So it's just really a great time to learn more about the bill and then have your own questions answered. And sometimes there will be a five-member subcommittee. We had one of those on the school funding bill. I was assigned to the school funding bill this year, and that was a 5-member subcommittee. Something to keep in mind is that even at the subcommittee level, a bill can be amended, which can make changes to it. And then if the bill passes through subcommittee, then it's eligible to go to the full committee for a vote. Here we're sitting in education committee last session.
So how many committees are there total?
So currently there's 27 standing committees in the Iowa House. And then there's a variety of other various committees that sometimes only meet during the interim and such. The standing committees are the ones that we would go to during session that are usually hosted each week. I currently sit on 4 committees. So I sit on Labor, Education, Human Resources, and the Economic Development Appropriations Committee. In the past, I sat on 5. So those do change from legislative session to legislative session.
How many members are in each committee? And what's the breakdown of that?
So committees have a varying number of members. So like what the number that's on my committees this year is quite different than what it was last year. This year, like I'll give education committee, for example. Our current education committee has 23 committee members. It has 15 from the majority party and 8 members from the minority party. Labor committee that I sit on has 17 committee members. It has 10 from the majority, 7 from the minority. So it just varies committee to committee. And then something that is consistent with each committee is each committee does have a chair and a vice chair. They're both from the majority party. And then each committee has a ranking member who's from the minority party. And then those are the 3 main spokespeople for the committee. And they work together to decide what bills will come through committee and who they're going to assign for those subcommittees on the bills. And then assuming that a bill that passes a subcommittee is chosen then to be voted on committee, because just because it passes the subcommittee doesn't mean the committee is still going to decide to take it up. It can then again be amended during committee.
Okay, so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
All right, nope, go ahead. Go ahead.
So once it's passed through a committee and a subcommittee, then where does it go?
So then it can go to the House floor and the full House of Representatives can vote on it. And again, it can be amended at that level. So you can see a bill can greatly change throughout this whole process of from when it started to be that idea to now getting through each stage. And sometimes those changes are good, sometimes not so good. Sometimes you realize that the bill might have had even a mistake or an error or wasn't numbered right. And so sometimes they're just technical changes, but sometimes they end up being completely different bills altogether. So it can go to the floor for a full debate, and it does have to make it through funnel week, which we're coming up on here soon. I believe funnel week's next week, to be eligible to be debated during that legislative session. And then if the bill passes through the Iowa House, then it can go over to the Senate. And if the Senate decides they want to take up the bill, then it goes through that same process through the Senate. It then has to go to a subcommittee, committee, and then be voted on in front of the full Senate. And if the Senate amends the bill at all, then it has to bounce back over to the House for us to vote on it again. So sometimes the Senate is the final process before it can go to the governor. Sometimes it has to come back to the House because then it can again be changed and amended.
So you mentioned amendments in funnel week earlier. Can you expand on those a little bit?
Yes, and I forgot. So obviously if it passes through the House and Senate, then it can go to the governor for her to sign into law. So amendments, as I've kind of talked through the different sections, amendments can be offered at pretty much every stage of the bill. And again, it can make it better. It can sometimes not. Sometimes it's the negotiation. So like this morning, my subcommittee, I wasn't totally against the bill, but there's some ways that I can see that it could be improved upon. And so I might choose to offer an amendment and work with the sponsor of the bill or the chair of the subcommittee and say, hey, what about this? Like, let's see if we can do this and make it a little bit better. And then I'm willing to sign off on it. And so sometimes you can work across the aisle with each other and really make it a true bipartisan bill. Sometimes, yeah, the amendments are not as great. And some bills are offered quite a few amendments. Some, you know, you might just have one amendment. And then the amendments are supposed to be germane to the bill, meaning that they actually have something to do with exactly what the bill was written to address. Now, every once in a while, a non-germane amendment will go through, and that's why sometimes you can find those bills that seem very innocent and very well-meaning, and then they have something really, really random stuck in them that really has nothing to do with anything. So you have to watch out for those. And because of all these amendments and changes, this is also why you may see legislators change their votes. So maybe I was a yes in subcommittee and I was a no in committee because the bill was changed with an amendment, or I was a yes in subcommittee, a yes in committee, and then I was a no on the floor because an amendment changed it. So that's also why we sometimes change our votes, or even when we write our constituents, we're like, oh yeah, I love this bill. It's great. I'm going to vote yes. And then somebody changes it with an amendment and we have to reconsider because the amendment just didn't do it justice and it would actually have unintended consequences that were not going to be great. So funnel, like I said, we're coming on funnel week, and having a funnel just helps the legislature narrow down what legislation we will be working on during that session. Without a funnel, session could just continue going on for months and months and months. And legislators are scheduled every other year to be here for 100 days, and the years in between to be here for 110 days. Most of us still work full-time jobs back home. A legislative position is just part-time. So if you didn't put that funnel, I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of bills introduced each session. So we could just be here nonstop if there was not the funnel. Now, there are a few exceptions for bills that are called funnel proof, and I won't go through all of them, but I'll give just a few examples. So bills that are on the Appropriations Committee or a Ways and Means Committee, some government oversight bills, those can be funnel proof and they could still be worked on later even if they didn't go through the funnel. Now, bills that do not make it through the funnel, with the exception of those few exceptions, they are considered to be dead. Now, if you ask any legislator, they will tell you that a bill never truly dies because what doesn't go through this session is still alive for next session. And those bills that maybe didn't make it through the funnel can return as amendments. And that's where sometimes you will see those non-germane things being placed on random bills because someone really wanted that piece of legislation to get through and the bill didn't make it through funnel. Well, now they can offer it as an amendment and attach it onto something else that is going to go through. And I will just share my last slide that kind of just, again, goes through the process. And this is assuming that there was nothing stopping it like funnel week, but it just, you know, again, starts with your idea, goes to drafting, it's introduced and assigned to a committee, goes to subcommittee, committee, the House, the Senate, and the governor.
Awesome. Very, very insightful.
Yeah. Any other questions for me?
So you mentioned that some things can be funnel proof. Is that ranked on like level of importance for like just general functioning of the government, or like what is that based on?
I don't know all the origins behind that. And like I said, there's more examples than what I gave you. But basically some of these things are still continued to be worked on past the funnel week on those various committees, you know, so I think of like Ways and Means and Appropriations, because sometimes the committees or the bills will pass through the committee, but because they have fiscal notes and such, then they need to go on to those other committees and then be voted on. So you would have to continue to keep those bills eligible past the funnel, or else they would just automatically be stopped if you didn't have those exceptions in there. Another thing, the leaders, so majority or minority leaders in the House, they can also sponsor bills past funnel. So sometimes I get emails saying, we realize it's past funnel week, but you know, you can have a leadership bill. Well, you know, you would have to have one of the leaders decide to introduce that. So there's still, you know, exceptions to getting past funnel, but for the most part, the legislation needs to have passed that subcommittee and committee before the final deadline to then be eligible to be voted on the floor. And just because it passes through subcommittee and committee, again, it does not guarantee that it's going to go to a full floor debate, because it can be stopped at each of those points. So one other thing that I did want to show, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share another screen, is the Iowa Legislative website. If I can find it on here. Oh, I think it's this screen. So if you go to legis.iowa.gov, you can type in a bill number that maybe you want to watch. And I just pulled some up already for an example. So here is, oops, my toolbar is not working. Okay, so here's one that I wrote myself, House File 339. You can go over to the bill history, and you can see that on February 2nd, this bill was introduced, and then it was referred to the Human Resources Committee. That's as far as it's gotten. It has not been assigned a subcommittee. It hasn't went to committee or any of that, but you can see that right here in the bill history. Here is the one that we debated on last night, House File 590. So this is going to have quite a bit more bill history. You can click on that and see the different bill numbers that relate to it, because bill numbers also change. Another confusing component, when they are assigned to a committee, they have one bill number, and then if they pass through committee, they have another bill number. This bill that in particular also had a version over in the Senate, so you'll see the Senate versions there, and then here you can see the whole history of when it was placed on the calendar. You can see the different amendments. And you can keep going down. You can see this bill has quite a bit more history. You can see who is on the subcommittee in the Senate, who is on the subcommittee in the House, and so on. And you can keep going. So here was where it passed in the Senate, shows you how many yays and nays passed in the House. And you can go back, if you click on the videos, you can watch the debate for that bill as well. So lots and lots of information here on the site.
And I know that you can leave a public comment on bills that are still in the works. Do those get read in like committees and subcommittees, the public comments that folks leave?
They do not. So it's up to the individuals that are assigned to the subcommittee to read those ahead of time before they go into committee, because again, remember that subcommittee is where you can really learn about the bill. And so some of those comments coming in might, you know, trigger a question. You might want to look something up or talk to a lobbyist or the organization. And so they're not read in during the subcommittee. Only people that show up live there, or I guess, again, I'm speaking for the House. The Senate has a little bit different rules this year, so I'm not sure what they're doing over there, but in the House, they're not read in. That people also will email the subcommittee members, and those, unless you choose to read them, like I did read one at my subcommittee yesterday, because they made some really important points that were not addressed during the subcommittee, so I read it. But typically just the 3 members will read them, and it's just up to the public then if they want to go on and read those comments themselves.
Cool.
So yeah, really, I mean, there's still a lot of more, you know, intricacies and stuff that go into different things, but this is the basic gist of how a bill travels through the Iowa House and the journey of the bill and all the different points that it can still be stopped and still be changed. So I hope everybody listening learned something. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out and contact us, and we can get those answered. So thank you and have a great day.
Okay. You ended the recording then?